Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, Indie Week. How's everybody today? Everybody feeling okay? Good? I got a little woo there. That was all right. Well, welcome. Welcome to Inbox Gold, how to build a compelling newsletter. We're hopefully going to give you some ideas and thoughts on that front. I'm really pleased and honored to be here with this amazing panel. We've had some fun conversations so far. I'm Michael Kauffman. I'm with the Clio Awards. We're a global awards program that focuses on creativity. I oversee our Clio Music and Clio Cannabis programs, and I would be glad to talk about any of those. Music and cannabis, I'm sure there's people that like to talk about that, so we could talk about that at some point later. But I want to have our panelists say hello and introduce themselves, so I'm going to pass it to Erica. Why don't you jump?
I am the head of creative marketing and experiences for music technology platform Vydia. We provide music entrepreneurs with the tools and infrastructure to power their business. This includes everything from rights management, sync, label services, you name it, we got it. This is my first panel here at Indie Week, and I'm so excited to be joining this incredible group of panelists. So I will pass it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jess Mitchell. I'm from MonsterCat. We are an electronic label based originally in Canada, but now with offices in LA where I work and in Singapore. MonsterCat is notorious for releasing not only the best of bass music, but also we have our own hosted events. We make our merchandise. We have a sync and partnerships team. We are endemic in video gaming. This is also my first panel at Indie Week. I'm so excited to be here and to answer anything that comes to mind about Inbox Gold.
Hi, I'm Carson Vickrey. I work for Marauder. We're an independent marketing agency, and we do a little bit of everything. So we work with some pretty incredible artists and labels, as well as producing conferences like the National Independent Venue Association conference coming up in July. And we brought Indie Week to the US. And my role is the director of marketing, and this is also my first panel at Indie Week.
Wow. Well, thank you. So this is all about how to build a compelling newsletter. So I thought we should start by just talking about what is a compelling newsletter? How do you even think about that? How do you define it? How do you measure it? So who wants to jump in on that?
I can start. So MonsterCat started as a YouTube channel, and now we are so much more. Actually, we're basically everything. But we wouldn't be there without having a direct connection with our fans. So for us, a newsletter is extremely important to keep everyone aware of everything we have going on and to ensure that they are able to pick up the newest of whatever we're putting out that is based on their interests. When you have a company as varied as MonsterCat is in our products and offerings, it's really important to know who wants what. And so we rely on our newsletter and any of our email sends to keep people in the know and then to also drive conversion when it matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar for us, I feel like in our newsletter work with our clients, we're always trying to figure out what the receiver of the newsletter is wanting to get. So do you want information about what's going on in your area? Do you want information about events going on that are pertinent to artists you like, genres you like? And that's how we really drive conversion, is thinking about what the person receiving the email is going to do when they open it.
What do you use? What service do you use?
So we've used a few. Right now we're using, the one that we're in the most is Hive.
Yep.
And Hive has a lot of integrations with the platforms, like the actual platforms we work with themselves. So for ticketing, it's really great. You can drag and drop events. And it also helps track your sales and opens, unsubscribes, all that jazz.
Erica, how about you? What's a compelling newsletter? How do you think about that?
I think a compelling newsletter is a newsletter that somebody wants to open. So I kind of want to touch on something that was said, and that's audience. And I think it's probably the one thing that a lot of people brush over, or they kind of just don't spend enough time on it. You really need to know who you're sending these newsletters to, and not just who they are, but what kind of information they like. And I think we typically kind of go into a space of immediately wanting to sell our product and show all of the awesome things that we're doing, but most people don't care. They want to be connected to the things that they are connected to. And so one of the things that we do at Vydia from a newsletter perspective is I don't know if you guys have seen the show You, but we kind of get a little creepy and we want to know who our target customer is, what kind of things are they interested in, what books are they reading, what industries are they actually involved in, what podcasts are they involved in, so that when we're building our newsletter, not only are we tapping into the stuff that's like very Vydia specific, very specific to our technology and our product, we're also able to add information that's just happening in the industry that's pertinent to the things that they're going to actually care about. The other thing that I always want to touch on, and maybe this is my own personal thing, something that's not too long, give the TLDR. There's nothing worse than opening up a newsletter and it's a bunch of chunky paragraphs. So it's just like getting directly to that point so that when people are looking at it, they know exactly what action it is that you're looking for them to take.
I like that a lot. I'm going to use a statement that I heard earlier in the conference, which is don't bore us, get to the chorus. It's exactly the mantra that we apply to our email marketing or any kind of newsletters. No one wants to scroll, especially if they're reading on their mobile, which most people are going to open a newsletter on. They don't want to keep scrolling until their thumb breaks. They want to get exactly what they want immediately, which means that there is you're going to benefit from making sure that the email is only going to people who can make use of it, that have expressed interest in what you're selling or what you want them to know, and that it's something that they can't get anywhere else. Because if they're following your newsletter, they're probably also following your socials. They might be following you on SMS, other channels. You want to make sure that it's really unique, that it's really compelling, and that they will feel like they are being served by receiving it.
Say that again. It was don't bore us.
Don't bore us, get to the chorus. Yeah.
I like that. All right. Hashtag. Now you've talked about, engaging your audience. Like what in open rates? Like what is a good open rate? What should people think about when they're measuring what's successful? How do you think about that?
I mean, I think open rates, I'm not going to give a specific number because it's dependent on really, one thing we count is unsubscribe rate. That's our biggest. It's like, are we losing people by sending this email out? Is this like getting in someone's inbox and they're like, oh my God, this is so annoying, I'm marking this as spam. So we really try and track conversions and unsubscribe. So are people actually opening up the email, looking at what we want them to look at and doing what we want them to do, which is engaging in what's already in the email and going to the next step, right? Whatever the next landing page is. And that's really our focus.
We use Klaviyo as our email service. We like Klaviyo because it integrates with Shopify, which is what we use for our merch sales. And I think very similar to you, it's not just one metric that we measure. It really depends on what we're trying to achieve with the outreach. If we're marketing our music releases, it may just be that we want to get awareness across. And in that case, we might be looking at open rate as the be-all, end-all. But with other priorities that we have, like selling event tickets or selling merchandise, we want people to click through to our pages wherever they may be. So one thing I really like about Klaviyo is that we get to track those conversions. We can see the dollar value that we can ascribe to those clicks and to some of the ticket pages that we use as well.
I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think about the content. Content strategy is all part of this. And obviously you were just talking about sort of different audiences, different purposes. How do you think about content? How should people maybe break that down?
Okay, so I really subscribe to the rule of 3. People need to see something in 3 different places. And it doesn't necessarily need to look exactly the same, but making sure that all of your channels, so your socials, your website, and your newsletter are pointing towards the same message. Creative can look different. I'm happy with that. But you want to make sure that you are getting in front of people enough that it's recognizable, right? So content strategy wouldn't be a real content strategy if it didn't include your newsletter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to echo that from the rule of 3. The rule of 3 is very, very important. Everyone is very distracted every day. If you are trying to message one thing on one platform to those people, you will not reach those people. You have the ability to reach somewhere between 2 and 5% of your audience on socials when you post something. It's not a very high number, even if you have a huge following. That's not really everybody that you want to reach. So when we consider our direct marketing, which we define that as email and SMS within MonsterCat, that plays to the rule of three. It complements the messaging that we're doing elsewhere. It's not exclusive to the email list unless it's some kind of special engagement for them. In terms of content, I try to keep the email pretty low in size because no one wants to wait around for a half hour for your email to load. It might not even go through the way you want it to look then. And we try to keep the messaging short and sweet. That first third of your email is going to be the most important part of the email because that's the first thing people see, and you want to compel them to keep reading or to click through. If you miss them in that top three, you're probably not going to get the result you want.
I just want to add to what both of you guys said. The rule of three is amazing, and I'm such a stickler on this. Know your audience, because one of the things is I think people immediately sort of say, okay, I'm going to put this content on every single social platform that I have. I'm going to put it in the newsletter. I'm going to just kind of inundate all of these spaces and all of these channels. But if your target audience isn't on TikTok, don't bother posting on TikTok, or figure out a way to adjust your content so that it speaks to that audience. So one of the specific things that Vydia has that is a lot of fun to work with from a content strategy, because it allows us to be, really diverse with our content. It's that, we have demographics that can be served in different channels. And so one of the things that when we're looking at our content strategy, we have to say, okay, cool, this is really awesome for Instagram, but this is not going to work for TikTok. And we're actually looking to, target this specific sector of our audience. So it doesn't even make sense for us to engage on Instagram at all. Or if we're looking, we have an initiative called our VIP experiences, and it's for kind of our top clients, our heavy hitters. They're not opening up emails or checking Instagram. So we have to be very specific and very unique with our approach to them. And so I will say it 1,000 times, know who you're talking to, because you can spend so much time and energy on creating content that nobody is going to see because it's just not the platforms that they're using. And it's easier, obviously, if your target demographic and your target audience all kind of falls within the same scope. But if you're kind of like Vydia, where we service music businesses and music entrepreneurs of all age ranges, we are, tapping into a bunch of different markets. So not just specifically music, but we're seeing people who are coming from the commerce space who are wanting to get into music, right? How we're attracting and talking to all of these people can change quite drastically. And even just in the space of all of our offerings, for example, we do a specific sync newsletter that we don't send out, the same way that we send out our regular newsletters, because that's not where the sync people are. So I think more than anything, when you're approaching content, it has to start with the audience. You need to know your audience back and forth and know everything about them and how they engage with content, so that when you are building that, and even from a visual and a creative perspective, you're making sure that it's something that's going to be super attractive to them. And I think that'll help with all of the engagement rates.
Right message, right person, right time.
Yes.
Who's doing some interesting things right now that you're seeing in direct outreach to fans or customers? I mean, what comes to mind? It could be something you're doing or something you've seen someone else doing.
I like anthropology. I know it's merchandise. I like a lot of things that they do because they first off use newsjacking, meaning that they will pay attention to what's happening in pop culture and apply it to unique landing pages for collections or pieces that make sense. I saw at the time that the most recent Taylor Swift album dropped, obviously Indie Week, we all talk about Taylor Swift here, right? They created an A/B test of emails where they played on lavender as a color, and they pulled pieces that coordinated with that. And then they also put together a free Taylor Swift tickets header, which got a lot of people clicking as well. So you might call it a little bit of a lowbrow way to reach people, but it was extremely successful. So even though it's not quite music marketing, it is a good reminder that newsjacking, meaning you're taking information that's happening, maybe that's trending on Twitter or that's in the headlines, and you're applying it to the messaging that you're putting out there, can be a really compelling way to get people's attention.
Anyone else have some examples of things that?
Yeah, there's a newsletter I subscribe to. It's called It's Nice That, and it's a creative design newsletter. And they have two. So they have a weekly one and then a daily one. I subscribe to both because it's incredible and I love it. But they never have images of people's faces when they talk about the artist. They always put the art first. And something about that has always made the email very pleasant to open. It's like a little art gallery, every time you open it. And I click on, I don't even think about it when I'm doing it, but I click on like 5 or 6 articles truly once a week for them. And I think they've made the newsletter like a beautiful space, right? And to think of your newsletter in that way as a place where people get information and, it's like an online third space. And I think thinking of it that way is really nice. And it's helped me think about how we run creative for our different newsletters and switching it up. And I think that it's beautiful to think about newsletters as a creative outlet as well.
How about you, Erica? Have you seen something?
I think in the kind of the similar vein as Carson, I follow Behance's newsletter, and I especially love it as a creative marketing professional because if you're having to create content so fast and so often, sometimes you're just like, I don't have a creative idea in my bones. And so what I love about the newsletter is obviously like it's a really dope newsletter, so I'm like, oh, we should be doing these things. But it also just kind of gives you some good inspo for like, okay, this is like a really cool graphic, a cool creative, and you can send that to your content and graphics team. And it's like a good way, I think, to get the juices flowing. So I think that's one that, and again, going back to what I think makes a successful newsletter, the way that they give the information and present the information, it's so tight and aesthetically like to the point, and you know exactly what it is that they're wanting you to see, and you know exactly what they're highlighting because that CTA is right at the top. So just in terms of inspo, I think it's just a really, really well done one.
Anyone have some examples of something that you've done in the last year that has really worked, that you've really enjoyed? You want to share?
I don't have a specific campaign in mind, but what I find works most compellingly is giving people who subscribe to our direct channels something that they can't get anywhere else. And sometimes that could be a discount. Sometimes that's pre-sale access to shows. Sometimes that's just, we do quite a few fun campaigns around the year. Like we have an annual April Fool's campaign, which seems ridiculous since everyone knows when April Fool's is going to happen, but they never know what to expect. When you have people who are in on the joke or who are part of a community where they feel like they're contributing to the story and not just a passive audience to that story, we get a really great response when we do that, and they wind up being our cheerleaders in other sources like the Discord, Reddit, and our social communities as well.
Anyone else have something they want to share that you've done, that you've been?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to sound simple, but we have shrunk the size of our newsletters. Mm-hmm. So we are really trying to keep it, like you were saying, tight and to the point. And it has been a real shift in thinking about how do we get as much information to the newsletter as possible to, okay, what's the most important thing? How do we highlight this? And then what's the strategy for pushing that information to other channels or adding an additional newsletter, maybe increasing the frequency in which we send it. And that's been a really big success for us this past, really just 6 months is when we've really started focusing on that more.
Nice. I want to add, if anybody has any questions, we have a tight window, so feel free to stand up, or I think maybe there's a mic in the back or something, so keep that in mind. So if you got a question, get ready to ask it. I do want to kind of keep talking a little bit about tips and tricks. I mean, we're talking about some examples of things that you've done, obviously, recently that you've enjoyed and have worked. But what are other tips and tricks? We're all here to what are some secrets? What are the tips and tricks?
Well, actually, can we talk a little bit about shrinking the newsletter as well and how you both went around doing that? Because we've also shrunk ours. And I think it might be interesting to explore how we did that and not just that we culled. Do you want to add or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we decided we're going to increase frequency and decrease the length of a newsletter, especially I'm talking about for a ticketing newsletter that we run for one of our clients' tickets. And the way our venues work and our regions work, we were hitting a point where we had probably like 60 events in one email. Yeah, and that was, it's just too much, and we want whoever's receiving the email to also be able to look at it in 1 or 2, 10 to 12 seconds. That's the average time someone's on a newsletter. In that 10 to 12 second period, and see something they want and then be able to move on, right? And that's really, I think, what went into that almost more than the curation of it was the creative of it. How do we get to the point quickly and serve our clients in the same vein?
I think for us it was about segmentation, right? So I think at a certain point we had one kind of massive newsletter that said, here's our product updates, here's our events, here's our culture, here's all of these things. And then we said, okay, now we're doing a lot of stuff. So it might just make sense to separate these things out. So now instead of having just sort of one newsletter that's running, weekly or so, we've created a cadence to where we have a very specific product newsletter, and everything that's in there is going to be your updates on product, and you know exactly what you're subscribing to and exactly what you're opening. We also have one that's label services focused, and that is strictly on label services initiatives. We have one, like I spoke about earlier, that's specifically on sync. So that allowed us to do a couple things. One, it allowed us to speak, again, me and the audience, it allowed us to speak directly to that audience so they know exactly what they're getting, but it also allowed us to, again, say things just a lot more concisely. And I think going back to the point of it being shortened and it being a little bit more like brevity, that was something that we were able to do. Now, what the tricky part of that is if you introduce a couple of different types of newsletters, you have to get really strict on your schedule and making sure that the cadence is working. And again, paying attention to that unsubscribe rate is going to really, really be helpful with that, because you can't have multiple newsletters going out a week. People will unsubscribe. They're not interested in it. But I think between setting the cadence schedule and then also giving people the option to opt into certain newsletters that they are interested in and out of the ones that they're not going to get that much information from, I think was really, really helpful with our strategy.
We changed the way we acquired people's emails as well. As part of our segmenting process over the last few years, we started also asking people if they were willing to give us their location and to select the interest that they had. When we have a company that's been around like ours for the last 12 years, we have people who subscribed back in 2011, and we have people who subscribed last week. They might not all be looking for the same thing. They might not be the same age. They might not live in the same country. They may not like EDM anymore, which is crazy to think. But as interests change, it's powerful to identify who they are and allow them to vocalize what they want to receive. In that way, we've shrunk also in terms of which segments we will send different types of content to. And we've also selected, depending on what kind of messaging it is, especially if it's a recurring music list, we may not send to people who have not opened an email from us in the last 180 days. If we're finding that they're more passive or that they seem to be bucketed into maybe events rather than our merchandise, we just won't send them anything. That helps keep our opt-outs low, and it allows us to quantify more powerfully what kind of conversion rate we get.
I think we have a question.
Yeah, hi. It's actually funny. I think, Jess, you kind of read my mind because what I was going to ask is you guys made great points about you really need to know your audience, and maybe you guys can speak more to how do you actually go about that, and how do you get past the sort of basic of demographic, super basic demographic stuff on social media and stuff. How do you get past that and actually really get to know the people, your subscribers?
So the question is, how do you really better understand your audience and the different segments and understanding who they are?
For us, it's the acquisition point. So we build lists in myriad ways. If someone is on our shop they choose to subscribe, and they'll get a discount by doing so, we put them in our shop segment. If we are hosting an event and they opt into email marketing from a ticket page, when we import them into our list, they have an event segment attachment. In other ways, we have a very vibrant community. We're very happy to have that community. Those individuals tend to be our super fans, and they want to hear everything. And so they'll receive multiple tags within our backend segment. But also, every year or so, we'll send a note saying, you haven't opened an email from us. Do you want to stay subscribed? If so, what do you want to hear from us on? And so that allows us to recapture people who may have been dormant for a period of time and relearn what they're most interested in.
I think looking a little bit outside of the newsletter space, just in general of like target demographic, and knowing your audience, I think the acquisition point, absolutely. I think the other thing is lifestyle and getting a little bit more into that, which I think people get a little bit afraid to do. Like I said, if you look at kind of like our profile, and it is the most extensive thing, and it can be a little jarring, but we literally know what kind of books do you like to read? What podcasts are you engaged with? And it's knowing people on that sort of personal level that allows you to make content and create things that feel a lot more specific to them. And then it creates this connection in this moment that I think tends to transcend kind of like your regular, average cookie cutter sort of marketing strategies. And that was kind of what allowed us to, for example, start this experiences programs, because we were looking at our target demographic and we're like, okay, we see that you guys really like these types of sports activities and you're kind of all going to the same restaurants, and we were kind of able to make some like pretty big conclusions out of the research that we had done. So when we launched the experiences program, one of our big initiatives was to host people at a Lakers game, and people loved it. It became this very personal, now we're kind of taking off the business suit and we're not selling you anything. We're just like, come chill with us. And then we were able to close a lot of things out of that, and just to create, and even in relationships and partnerships that we already had, it went from like, this is a company that like I know and I'm partnered with, to like, wow, these are like cool people that I whatever you guys do, I want to be a part of it because I'm now connected to you in a personal way. And the only way to connect with somebody in a personal way is to take interest in their personal lifestyle, their daily lives. And I know you're probably thinking, well, I don't know if I have enough time to do that. But it's interesting how many patterns you'll find. And it becomes a lot less daunting once you start to really like tune into them. Yeah, that worked for us. So.
The only thing, they hit the nail on the head. I think the only other thing I'd add is just thinking of your audience like a community, and being respectful, right, of like not overloading them with newsletters, not overloading them with different notifications, and just making sure that what you're sending them is relevant and is something that they likely can't get anywhere else. Yeah.
I'd love to hear if there's specific tools that you find to be very effective, if there's CRM tools, or are there any things that you use a lot that you'd like to suggest to people if they're trying to figure out their path forward on building compelling newsletter gold?
I don't know if I'd have a specific tool that I'd recommend, but I'd think about the audience that you're going to reach out to on a higher frequency, and how you'd like to best segment them, and then sort of back your way into what tool makes the most sense to you, because that's what you want to do. You want to be able to have a space where you can keep the people you're going to talk to and build out your super fans, and monitor what they're doing, how they're interacting with your platform. So if you have a very active social media presence, make sure you're using a platform that plugs into that and can monitor that as well. But I think from there, it's really dependent on what you see as valuable to track for your audience.
I would also say automation is a really big thing. I know ActiveCampaign does a really good job with it, but setting up drip campaigns and things like that will make your life so much easier. I think sometimes when we're first kind of starting out and we're like dabbling with it, it's like every single time there's a newsletter, you have to spend so much time sort of creating it. So I do suggest, especially in the beginning, as you're kind of getting your flow, create as many templates as you can, setting up drip campaigns, which is just, it'll trigger certain things if, once somebody signs up, they'll automatically get your welcome newsletter. Or, if it's been a while, it'll automatically send something. So finding ways to kind of automate as much of this process, I think is always really, really helpful, especially in the beginning. And then it allows you more space to focus on the actual content and how you want to evolve that over time.
Do we have a question? One left.
I was just curious to hear your thoughts on like seconds time, like how much consideration pays back, and general thoughts on that. Like how do you avoid or how to ship it for specific messaging or whatever?
Don't send on a Friday night. Don't send on a Friday night. We have a global fan base, so we will batch send, meaning that we'll target usually a weekday morning in whatever country is receiving that email. We also will create funnels, especially for our merchandise, where they're timed. If somebody abandons a cart, they will receive an email from us a day later saying, "You forgot something, go buy it." So it depends on what server or service you're using for your emails and what kind of power or automation you can set up. But usually the send time is not super make or break unless you're sending it on a weekend when everybody is tuned out. You want to get them during those business hours.
Yeah. I think we're wrapping.
Go ahead. No.
Really, really quick. Yeah, I think a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on send time. It's not as detrimental or whatever as you may think it is. I think the biggest thing is think about yourself as a consumer. When are you most on your phone? Like most people check their emails first thing in the morning, like just kind of as a natural thing. So you want it to be top of the inbox kind of around that time and that space. But usually the best thing to do is to think about you and your own practices because most people tend to fall in those same patterns.
All right, I think we're about out of time, but I want to do like a 10-second speed round since we're at Indie Week. I just want to give you a chance. If anybody has an artist or music or anything they want to recommend we should all listen to, now's your last chance to do that. So anything come to mind from anybody? Or anybody in the crowd if you've got somebody we got to listen to.
Rudy Love Jr.
Ah.
Listen to him. He's great.
Subscribe to the MonsterCat newsletter. We put out 5 releases a week and everything else under the sun.
Kiki Palmer, and she's actually going to be speaking in this room right after this. So I hope you guys all stay. Our co-president will be interviewing her, and it is going to be the best thing you've seen all week.
And I would also recommend, if you're a fan of advertising, to go to the Clio website and subscribe to the Muse by Clio newsletter. Just one cool thing about it, we have a series called Art of the Album where people pick their favorite album covers. And it's just mind-blowing. Every time you read it, you want to listen to the records, just hearing how passionate people are about the covers. So that would be my recommendation, not an artist, but a thing. But thank you to the panel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.